and technical support to districts as they implement this legislation to have strategies that will really work to support teachers across the state. So I just wanted to provide that update in terms of kind of educator equity work that's happening in other areas. So thank you for your time this morning.
Well, thank you very much. Any questions from the commission? Well, thank you for being with us this morning, and we're pleased to hear this. The work of the commission on these issues. We get to watch staff do the good work. So I just want to make sure that we recognize the staff for how they take the concepts, the policies, and move them to reality. So thank you very much. So the next item on our agenda, and we're a little bit ahead, is our public testimony, our invited testimony. And we have invited testimony this morning from Kim Parker Charenas. I think she was on our call yesterday from the Willamette Workforce Partnership. And I'm not sure that she's joined us yet. Kim, are you with us?
Chair Cross, I believe that she's going to join us at exactly 10.
Okay. Well, how about I take the prerogative of the chair and give us a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back unless somebody has a burning desire to have a few minutes on the agenda. All right. Let's see. We'll come back. Oh, Helen, I see a hand up. Yep.
Sorry, my Teams. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My Teams is incredibly slow. I just wanted to say that thanks to Ben for sending out the note about the new Indigenous funding thing, and I've shared that with a bunch of the high school counsellors that I know around here, and we'll be putting it out on LinkedIn and other social, and it seems that that is actually pretty effective. So, and people haven't, like, there's just so much news right now. People haven't really clicked to it and haven't clicked to what a really big deal it is, and how it's kind of you kind of got to jump on it now, right? Yes. You don't like wait. So like go for it, plaster it all over social. It's really worth getting like I'm taking really personally, get the word out, you know?
Yes. Thank you, Helen. Motu?
I also just wanted to say I actually work with a couple of high school students and a lot of students here in the PSU community, but also in like the Portland area. And then I guess some of them found out that, I don't know how they found out that I was a part of the HECC, but then they're like, are you a part of the group? I was like, oh no, I didn't do anything. It was like the staff and the other folks who did everything. But then I can tell you so many students are appreciative, mostly because they were surprised that this was a program specifically for Native American students, mostly because programs do exist, but they were very limited. And so this was like a great opportunity, especially for those who are kind of weighing if they should pursue higher education, mostly because they heard so many stories of like students struggling. They didn't know if they had the money. But then now that the financial barrier will disappear for a year, at least they'll give them enough time to actually prepare for school. And then like it's just been like a really refreshing experience, not to hear like the sad stories, but empowering stories from students saying like, I want to go to school because now I can actually afford it. And so I just wanted to say that from the student who's hearing rumors, from the student who some don't know I'm a part of HECC, it was actually really nice. So, and now they're talking about y'all. Granted, they can't really say the acronym, but then at least they know the acronym. So
yeah. Commissioner Cepelli, thank you so much for that insight, because you know, we don't get to hear that direct feedback, so thank you. Anyone else? Well, And let's check. No, I don't see our guest. So let's take just a couple of minutes and then we'll come back. I think it's right now about a couple minutes too, so we'll. Carolyn, are you back with us?
Yes, I sure am.
And is our guest arrived? Yes.
I do not see our guest has
Okay.
arrived.
All right. I know that we've made a change in the agenda to move the legislative update later. Do we have a time for that yet? Do you know?
Chair Cross,
Yes.
so it looks like our guest, Kim Parker Uranus, has arrived. So I think you
Okay.
can take her testimony. I also think we can, I'll be in communication with you and with Kyle about the legislative
Okay.
report timing.
Okay. Sounds good. So then let's reconvene and take our invited testimony from the Willamette Workforce Partnership from Kim Parker Uranus. And Kim, are you with?
Hi, good morning. Yes, thank you, Chair Cross. My name, and I have to credit you with pronunciation. Nicely done. Kim Parker Uranus. I am the Executive Director for Willamette Workforce Partnership. We're the workforce board that serves the Mid-Valley. And I'm also the chair of the Oregon Workforce Partnership, which is the statewide association of the 9 workforce boards that serve the region. And thank you very much for being here and this opportunity to share some of what's going on in the world of workforce and how it aligns with the work that you all are doing. So somebody has a slide deck for me.
Yes, I am pulling it up now.
Great, thank you. Okay, next slide, please. This, just as a reminder, is a map of the 9 local workforce board regions. As I mentioned, I'm there in the middle. We are an association. We meet weekly via Zoom. We work closely together to strengthen the workforce system and make sure we're aligned across the state in our efforts. Next slide, please. I slipped this in just as also kind of a reminder that workforce development boards are driven by the private sector businesses in our region. The Federal Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act has identified as a compliance element of the work that we do that 50% plus 1 of our board of directors needs to come from the private sector. So that is sort of ever present in all the decisions we make and the work that we do. Next slide, please. As I was reviewing the strategic roadmap for the Higher Education Coordinating Commission, I went through really and just pulled out key areas that I think our work in the public workforce system aligns. So when it comes to the vision of the strategic roadmap, really we as a public workforce system and as individual workforce development boards touch on everything, all the elements. Our goal here is to work with individuals to get them the skills they need to meet the employer demands in our region. So that's education, that's credentialing, it's skill development, and then providing all the supports around that to help them be successful. Next slide. And please interrupt me if you've got a question or a comment, although I've only got like 5 more slides, so it should be brief. So the first action on your roadmap is transform and innovate to serve students and learners the best. So again, I went through the document and just pulled out key words and key theories and themes that I think directly are related to the work that we do. We are a flexible system. All 9 boards are private, nonprofit, 501c3 organizations, which allows us to be nimble and flexible to meet the needs of both our employers and our participants, our job seekers, our youth that are enrolled in our program. We clearly serve non-traditional students. A lot of the folks that come through our programs maybe have started school or a credential at some point in their life and are coming back to complete it. They realize that they need to have additional education or credentials to get the jobs that they want to become self-sufficient. We offer supportive services. So if that's transportation support, childcare support, materials to get their job done, scrubs for healthcare, for instance, we can help cover those expenses. We tend to be pretty innovative, and we obviously provide easy access. And I have to just sort of say that over the last few years, we have created many new avenues for access as a result of the pandemic. So it used to be that participants and individuals had to come to us, and now we have a pretty robust virtual service delivery across the state that is creating opportunities and access for people that had not been able to in the past. Next slide, please. Center higher education and workforce training capacity on current and future state needs. This is really what we do. We work closely with economists and businesses in our regions to try to anticipate and identify what the workforce needs are, and then we invest in those. We have to identify targeted sectors in each of our regions and then prioritize those sectors in our investments for training with our participants and with our youth. So we are investing to train in order to meet the highest workforce needs in our region. And a lot of this happens obviously through higher education institutions. So lots of partnership with community college and others around the state. Okay, go ahead, thanks.
Sorry about that.
No, that's good. You're anticipating. Ensure that post-secondary learners can afford to meet their basic needs. We pay for training. So we want folks to be successful. We want to remove as many barriers as possible. So let's pay for that credential. Let's pay to complete the training program that maybe had been started in the past, and we need to come back and really cross the finish line for individuals. We leverage federal investments. The Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act is a federal investment. We also have state funding, obviously with Future Ready Oregon. That is a huge boost into our system. And so there's a lot of braiding of investments throughout the system. And again, we fund supportive services to make sure that barriers are removed for participants so they can be successful. Create and support a continuum of pathways from education and training to career. We invest in a lot of work-based learning. This can be paid work experience so that individuals can get into a job and kind of experience what it's like with an employer. And then on-the-job training is another one of our biggest programs. So those are higher first positions, so we will pay an employer a portion of wages for a new hire while that person is learning the job while they after they've already been hired. So it's a win-win for everybody. So lots of work-based learning, and I also think it's important to say that this has become even larger in the last few months in terms of investment, that we have found that employers are willing to take chances maybe that they hadn't in the past because of the tight labor market. And so having a little bit of an incentive like this really can help support the employer and then obviously the job seeker and the participant so that they can actually get a job and be successful. Our bread and butter is short-term certification. We want to get people in, get them educated, get them certified, and get them employed. So that's definitely sort of the sweet spot of our programs. Lots of collaboration and many different efforts around reentry throughout the state. And I won't get into that now, but our board in Central Oregon has been engaged in this pretty robustly, as have other boards, including the Portland area. We have done a lot of work in reentry, and I believe that is also going to just increase, particularly with the Future Ready Oregon investment, because we recognize that there's lots of opportunity there. And finally, number 5 is increased public investment to meet post-secondary goals. We work with legislators. We were actively engaged with the Future Ready Oregon efforts. I actually served on the workforce work group of the Racial Justice Council as chair of the board. And we are constantly educating and informing our elected officials on the work that we do and advocating for investment. So that brings us to the end of my PowerPoint. Are there any questions or comments from any of you? Thank you so much for the opportunity.
I have a question, but I will ask members of the commission first. Does anyone have a question? If not, I attended the Future Ready Oregon Summit, and one of the conversations there was about the need, and this was kind of a broad, I think, national discussion to improve the interface between workforce and universities, higher education. And certainly many of the things on your list is really in that sweet spot. So given our where we're sitting at the moment with Future Ready Oregon, do we see new things on the horizon or expanded relationships between the universities and the workforce boards? How do you see closing that gap?
Yeah, it is a great question. And I would say it depends probably. Again, really our focus is short-term certification and credentialing. So we want to get people educated and out into the workforce so they can become self-sufficient. So that has been kind of where we have focused our attention and our investment, frankly. Future Ready Oregon does create an opportunity that we haven't seen before. And I can just speak for myself. One of the opportunities we're looking at with Future Ready is to do a more intensive investment in some behavioral health care arenas. I don't know that will necessarily engage the university system, but it is beyond sort of the short-term credentialing and certification that we've done historically. I know that the workforce board down in Lane County has a pretty strong relationship, I would say, with the University of Oregon. I've had many conversations with Western Oregon University, but it's just a matter of what do those universities have to offer that can also sort of meet our goals of getting individuals those short-term credentials so that they can get a job and become self-sufficient. Yeah. But I also have this sort of general sense that those conversations are ongoing, but there's not like a specific, wow, here's a great example of a time that has happened. Yeah. But really, really good question. And it's something that it does not go undiscussed on a regular basis, for sure.
Thank you. We had a lot of discussion at the summit about the shifting nature of where the student population comes from in higher education and the need for employers, businesses to identify people of all ages who might benefit or advance their skills through higher education, and so that we really are rethinking the pathway, that it's not just the traditional student out of high school, it's right. the worker who comes in and out of the university for various credentials or to earn a degree with a longer term goal of achieving higher education outcomes. So, and I just want to say that we have taken the opportunity in these invited testimony to fulfill the HECC coordinating role, to reach out to people, to really try to build this alignment to support in multiple directions the work of all aspects of higher education and workforce, and Future Ready Oregon really does give us an opportunity at the moment to do that. So
yeah, I appreciate that very much.
Any other questions before we let our speaker go? Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks again for the opportunity. I look forward to the continued conversation. Can't wait till I can come back and tell you all the wonderful things that we've done with Future Ready Oregon and how we've helped individuals throughout the state.
Great, thank you. Thanks for coming. Well, the next item on our agenda is our public testimony, and I see that Randy Campus from the Balmer Institute is with us, and we will turn it over to you. And I'm really glad that you could be with us today and tell us about this exciting new development.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it. I also want to thank many of our collaborators on this call. We've been developing the curriculum for our new undergraduate degree, which I'll speak a bit more about in a moment. But we've benefited greatly from community organizations, parent organizations, professional societies, mental health service agencies, healthcare agencies, just abundant input and feedback and advice from our colleagues around the state. The curriculum that we're developing is informed by that work, but it's also informed by the 25 faculty we have at the U of O right now who are designing the undergraduate curriculum program. In addition to that, we plan to be launching a 3-course sequence for teachers to help them deal basically with the behavioral health care issues that they're encountering in their classrooms and their school buildings, which are all too tragic these days. With regard to the, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, could you state for the record your name and
Yeah.
where you're from? Thank you.
Excuse me. Randy Camphouse, University of Oregon faculty member, acting executive director of the Balmer Institute for Children's Behavioral Health at the University of Oregon. Thank you. The undergraduate curriculum professional role has been proposed, and we have a draft of that available on the Balmer Institute website. We also have the training objectives worked out, and those are available. They're available for public comment and review as of Monday, and one may find that link at Children's Behavioral Health at uoregon.edu to provide us with that feedback. At this point, I think it's important that I make the HECC aware that the university sees this as a responsibility of ours to meet this urgent need. And so in addition to the 3-course sequence for teachers in the fall, we are still on plan to be able to have a proposal before you that would allow us time to admit an initial cohort, we hope, of about 200 undergraduate students into the 4-year bachelor's degree program in fall of 23. And that will be the behavioral health specialist program at the U of O, the first one that we've developed of this type. So those are the high level updates for you, and I'm very sensitive to your time, which is why I blew past my introduction, so I apologize for that. But I'd be happy to entertain any comments or questions that you may have.
Frank, Commissioner Goulard, please go, and then Commissioner Rowe. And you're on mute.
Thank you. Randy, is the program that you just described, is it a 2-year program, meaning their junior, senior years, whereas the previous 2 years they're in prerequisite type classes, similar to the Lillis Business School, which is a 2-year program for their last 2 years?
It's intended to be quite applied. And so we've learned quite a bit from the OHSU School of Nursing program because of their deep and extensive clinical rotations, and we're using that as one of our models for informing the last 2 years of the program. At this point, it is a 4-year degree program because we think we'll need the intensive clinical training in the last 2 years. We're also exploring pathways with area community colleges for individuals who might not enter through the U of O or but rather transfer into the program in, let's say, their 3rd or junior year. So we've only been in existence for a little over 2 months now. We're moving very fast, but we're really encouraged by the enthusiasm of potential higher ed partners to increase the scale. but also to increase student access to the degree program. More to come on that.
Okay, so students will be having some relevant hands-on experience in their freshman, sophomore years while they're doing their normal gen ed requirements in other areas.
There will be very little in the first 2 years because
okay, that was my question.
Yeah.
So
and
similar to the Lola School of Business in their program, which I'm quite familiar with. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry,
okay.
I'm less familiar with that program.
No, that's all right. Thank you.
Commissioner Rowe.
I think my question has been covered in the answer to Commissioner Gillard's question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And just so everyone in our group knows, this is the program that's going into the old Concordia College campus in Portland, and the made possible by generous donation from the Balmers. So any other questions or comments?
Chair Cross, I have a question.
Yes.
Thank you. And thank you for this information. And Randy, I'm sorry, this question is really kind of, I just need a big picture. Can you help me understand a little bit how the Balmer Institute credential is distinguished differently from what might be like social work or mental health that goes into an education system? I'm just kind of curious about how this credential stands on its own.
Yeah. Number one, it is at the bachelor's level, and that's the great workforce shortage in children's behavioral health in school settings and out of school settings as well. And so that's purposeful because we do graduate many individuals in a variety of mental health care areas at the master's and doctoral levels. And so we're trying this new approach to admit, instead of our usual handful of students to a QMHP program, to admit in much larger numbers. Secondly, the curriculum is unprecedented, and that's very exciting for us because we get to design our own. And so it's a truly transdisciplinary approach. We have faculty with master's and doctoral degrees in social work engaged in the design process, public health, psychology, education, family studies, etc. It's been really exciting to watch the diverse expertise. That's probably a long way of saying that the program will be pretty much unrecognizable because we get the opportunity to introduce some of the latest science-based interventions into the program that have not been deployed well at scale. And at the same time, we get to include innovations from a variety of disciplines. I'll give you one example. We are going to focus much of the training on prevention because there has been so much justifiably, because of the crisis, we have a great sense of urgency to take care of children's and families' needs now. But part of this distinctive aspect of this training will draw upon the expertise of our Prevention Science Institute, where we will try to essentially create and apply existing innovations at scale that are the dental health equivalent of a fluoridated water supply. In schools, that's often known as social emotional learning. And as you and all of us know who have worked in schools, the rollout of social emotional learning has been less effective than it should be because we do not have a cadre of professionals who have dedicated training in universal prevention practices, inclusive of social emotional learning. So we hope to help with that prevention effort by having individuals who are not trained through workshops, not trained by CASEL workshops, for example, but have extensive training in the positive components of social emotional learning, identification of those that are less efficacious, how to roll it out within a school building to include all stakeholders to make it more effective. So that prevention focus will make this degree quite distinct. in addition to that, we're going to focus quite a bit on, and please visit the website, you'll see this as one of the training objectives, in early intervention, and try to identify kids long before they're suffering so badly that they need to come to a qualified mental health professional for care. So we're training this group in universal screening, for example, and how to utilize that to detect children with emerging problems, analogous to sort of pre-diabetic syndrome, where there's a lot of focus in healthcare on identifying individuals long before they're diagnosed. We want to do the same thing for children who are sad, worried, and their parents haven't identified it, and their teachers haven't identified it. And so we want to help schools and other institutions deploy detection methods that will catch these kids early and try to head off considerable suffering and hopefully diagnosis. So those are a couple of distinguishing characteristics.
Thank you. Commissioner Sapelli.
I just had first of all, I'm just going to say this is like a really impressive program from my end. I am curious if you will be offering any certificates or minors, mostly because I know a couple of students who have already majored in something and now there's this great program, but it might be too late for them to switch majors. And so are there opportunities for other students who's already far along their like educational journey to like kind of hop on this new degree to kind of get at least some experience before they graduate? Also, I remember reading something about training being provided for current staff members who I guess want additional training. So what does that process look like? I'm assuming they're not going to get a bachelor's, but is it more of like a certificate?
Right. It is a certificate, and so the first 3 courses will be ready for fall, and it will be focused primarily at teachers because they're front line in schools and helping children manage their emotions and implement prevention practices. So anyone can enroll, but those will be advertised by the end of May, that sequence of courses, and that's to meet not to be repetitive, but the urgency, which I felt again this morning when I met with the Portland Public Schools. As far as our undergraduates at the U of O or at other institutions that might want to transfer in, we're hiring an advisor that's going to help with this effort, make sure students have the prereqs, make sure students are aware of the program so that they can start to plan their schedule. So that transfer in doesn't cause any delays or financial assistance problems for them. Minors within the university or in partnership with other institutions are probably a year or 2 out. We're focused exclusively now on in-field coursework for individuals who can benefit from that and have interest, and getting a really first-class program ready for the HECC to review for launch next fall at the undergraduate level.
Thank you. Any other questions? Well, thank you for coming and filling us in today.
It's a pleasure.
Karen,
good luck with your work.
Thank you. Karen Lynn, is there anyone else signed up for public testimony?
No, there is not.
Thank you. Well, with that, we're ahead of schedule, but let's move to the consent items on our calendar. And while you shift gears a little bit, commissioners, I just will remind those who are with us that these consent items have been fully vetted by staff, and it's our role to approve these. So this is an action item, and I do want to point out how when we see the types of degrees that come across in these consent calendars or the certificate programs, I think we're seeing in action the relationship between workforce and higher education, and how that communication, how our higher education system is responding to workforce needs, to the changing environment, to the changing demands of what our students need to learn, or what employers need their employees to learn. So, and with unless there's someone wants to pull out one of these, we'll consider them all together. And I'm not seeing any hands or concerns. So with that, I'll accept a motion to approve our consent items on our calendar.
So moved.
Second.
And I missed who the motion came from. Commissioner Rowe seconded.
That was Arnel Fajardo.
Oh, Commissioner Fajardo moved. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. We are going to move the legislative update later in our meeting, so we're going to call on Ramona and Chair Rowe to report out on the report from our committee meeting yesterday on funding, the budget development update. So,
Ramona, you want to start?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
For the record, my name's Ramona Rademacher. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of HECC. We had a good conversation yesterday at the FNA subcommittee meeting. Basically, what we were doing was we continued our ongoing discussion of the budget development process. And we had committed to you at the last meeting that we not only wanted to go broader in terms of who we talked to get input on budget ideas, but we also, in our conversations with you, wanted to go deeper on some of these topics so that you had the opportunity to understand exactly what people were asking for, and also to help us prioritize our list of policy option packages that we submit to the new governor. We are required as a state agency to submit a prioritized list of policy option or budget add packages to the governor's office on September 1st. Now, we recognize not all policy option packages are created equal. I mean, a no-cost position doesn't compare to a multi-million-dollar capital bond request or to students. So how we do that is we tend to prioritize our asks in categories. And so to prepare you guys to help us do what we're required to do and submit those priority policy option packages, we invited multiple panels to talk to the commission members, and over half of you were there yesterday, so I'm not going to go deep on what each of them said, but mostly we spent time listening and to the ideas that they want for us to consider to include in our agency request budget. We heard from a financial aid panel that discussed proposed modifications to the Oregon Opportunity Grant and the Oregon Promise Grant. That was everything from some fairly minor tweaks to some major policy changes. And it really gave you a menu of options to consider in terms of how far do you want us to go in modifying the financial aid packages available to students in the future. We also heard from the Oregon Community College Association and the Oregon Council of Presidents. They covered everything from the costs they're experiencing that are impacting current service level needs to cybersecurity and their desire to expand their ability to provide more equitable services to underrepresented students. And so, and a lot of ideas above and beyond that, but it was a range of things that they asked for us to consider. We also heard from several members representing students, and they talked about the importance of college access programs for incoming students and wanting to see investments in financial aid as well as wraparound services materialize. Staff and faculty brought another perspective. They asked us to really consider how do we reduce burnout and turnover among staff and faculty, because if we don't support the people delivering these services to students, how are they going to be able to support the students? Many years ago, I talked to a K through 12 principal, and he told me if you don't feed the teachers, they'll eat the students. And so I think that kind of that perspective being represented there, but in a much more eloquent way. And last but certainly not least, we heard from several members of the workforce development panel, and they talked about the needs we need to address for youth, for volunteers, for job seekers and workers, needing everything from apprenticeships to upskilling assistance. Now, some of the takeaways, and this is my takeaway, so it's not as important as your takeaway. So I'm interested, if I'm not representing it the way you want to, please correct me. But you know, the vast majority of money in the HECC budget is distributed to local workforce boards, direct student aid, and institutional support. So we really heard about most of the money going out of the HECC budget. And what I heard was that each of these groups represents a different facet of the same system. And while we're looking to expand and innovate, we also heard some real interest in the need to preserve and protect the infrastructure and investments that have already been made. And there's different entry points into this system for education and training for different populations with different needs being served by it, including the youth, the volunteers, underrepresented students, and job seekers. And both of these things need our attention and maintenance and support. So it becomes really hard, and so I know I'm asking you an almost impossible task to prioritize different parts of the same system, because neglect of any part of it is going to result in it not working as effectively as it could be, or not working at all. And so yesterday I asked the commissioners participating specifically to give us feedback on their goals and the packages that they wanted to make sure that the HECC prioritized. Probably the loudest and most consistent message I heard was support for students and across the board support for expanding financial aid available to them. And that may be expanding who gets it as well as what types or the amounts of aid. If I didn't hear what you were saying, I definitely want to hear from people who participated and also the newcomers to the discussion today about what is it you want us to know or hear about how we prioritize this in your mind, and any advice you can give us as we go forward to really decide which packages remain on the list and in what order we put them in.
Well, that couldn't have been a better summary in my view, Ramona. Thank you very much. That was detailed and touched all the bases. I think on the last point of expanding financial aid for students and clearing up some gaps in it and just some things that make it more difficult than it needs to be for students. She absolutely heard right that was the most enthusiastic. We discussed that in great detail near the top of the meeting before we saw sort of the other facets of perspectives into the system. And so assuming to speak for the group that was there, that we don't see that in opposition to any other particular interest and the need to continue programs. And we would certainly hope that whether it's the faculty, whether it's the consolidated university budget, whether it's the workforce group, that we would, as this process goes forward, that we would have a unified enthusiasm about putting every ounce of energy and every single dollar we can into financial aid. I know that's going to get more difficult as the process goes down the road, and everyone has their programs they need to continue and the new initiatives they want to undertake. But I can't, for the rest of the commissioners who weren't able to be there yesterday, I can't overstate the amount of enthusiasm and I would say commitment commissioners that were in attendance expressed for this being a huge push for the coming biennium. We did not, in our conversation, put it in the political context, the political reality of a new governor coming in and having his or her priorities and having to get this in there. But it seems to me that that makes it even more urgent and potentially a very good time to get this, to get a big, clear push for this, especially if all of the constituents, if all of the people involved and all of the entities are behind it and decide that this is worth whatever we need, what compromises we need to make in other areas in order to have Oregon deliver on its promises to its students in terms of financial help. So with that, the only other thing I'd say would be to underscore what Chair Cross said at the beginning. This was certainly the first time we've had stakeholders involved, either at this level with the commissioners or this early in the process with the commissioners. It was a quite long meeting, but it was very helpful to hear from them all at once and to see really that we are a part, that they realize just as much as the commissioners do that we're all together a part of the same system. I was also very encouraged to hear the level of emphasis that each of the stakeholder groups put on equity and access and delivering our educational services and opportunities to all students in Oregon and removing barricades. So I want to thank them again for their participation. I certainly want to thank staff for the incredible work that went into this, and Chair Cross and the rest of you for the opportunity to listen this early to these stakeholders and to hear their priorities. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Erzberboski has her hand up.
Thank you, Chair Cross. It's been 9 years that Frank and I have served on the commission, and I just was in awe yesterday to see this come together, not only so early, but so inclusive, so transparent. The work that went into making the presentations and to really hear from all of those that are so heavily involved what we really need to know to be informed to make the decisions as we move forward with this important work. I was reminded as I was going through some of my daily emails with the ripped from the headlines of higher education, the impact that increased interest rates are going to have on student loans. Mm-hmm. And so as we start thinking about that true cost of college and the transparency of what's happening right now for our students that have to borrow, even on the federal level, we don't get to set those interest rates. They're set from outside of our purview. And the more we can do to guarantee those finances for them and to make that really understandable. We even heard from understanding that this is what the cost of college is going to be for me, and I can see it and I can do it and I can live into it. That's going to start shifting as we see some of these other outside variables shifting. So I really applaud and encourage you to dare to dream big and really deliver to these students the Oregon promise that we're trying to live into as a state.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other comments or questions? So this work has only just begun. I think I was so appreciative yesterday and reflecting last evening about the diversity of needs across different sectors of the system and the unified need of the entire system. It is, I think, it's so important that we have this conversation to really build a movement, a coordinated sense of how do we lift everyone up in the process of supporting this higher education system, and how we've made some really good strides in recent years. I also want to thank staff for the wonderful job done in convening, lining up the right panels, getting us informed, and getting this happening early in the process. It's no easy matter to explain all of the things that were explained to us, different things that have to be considered in the budgeting process. So, Ramona, thank you for your work on that, and your staff. That is fantastic.
Great, thank you. And I would just encourage you, we are in the middle of this process, and so the conversation will be continuing. And so you will see us coming back to you again up to the point where we ask for approval of the budget that we're intending to submit. But there's also always opportunity if you have additional thoughts or comments to contact us directly. So thank
Great.
you.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair Rowe, for reporting out. It's a masterful job running a very demanding meeting yesterday.
Sure, Cross, I can give you a little bit of an agenda update. I think from here, I've been scrambling to try to get a hold of folks to see how we can organize the rest of the meeting, given the fact that you're running well ahead of schedule. I think what we're going to do is Kyle is unavailable. I'm going to briefly summarize the legislative update that you received by email this morning and has been posted online that he provided. So I will do that. In the meantime, we're trying to get a hold of Clay Martin and Kelly Zink, who are scheduled to present the 9.2 item, to see if they can follow my legislative report. If they are able to do so, then we'll move from the legislative report to their report and then to a lunch break, coming back at 12:30 for the final item, which would be the educator equity plans. I think that you should assume that's time certain, that 12:30 we will discuss those plans from 12:30 to 1:15. So that's my hope, Mr. Chair. If we're not able to get a hold of Kelly and Clay, then we'll either have to sort of take a longer lunch break and take them at the time that's posted on the agenda, 1:15, or shift them to a different meeting date. Sound all right?
It sounds good. I'm sure no one will complain about having a longer lunch break.
Yeah. We actually scheduled this one for longer because we expected to be meeting in person, and we realized when we met in person last month that we needed more than the 25 or 30-minute lunch break that seemed okay when we were having a remote meeting should be longer to allow for some conversation, et cetera. But here we are remote, and you may end up with a longer lunch break even than that. So let me just draw your attention to the report that you received from Karen Lynn on behalf of Kyle Thomas, the May legislative update. That should be in your email inboxes. And for those who are tuning in, this is available with the rest of the HECC Commission meeting materials from our website as docket item 7.0. And Kyle's report goes into much greater detail than my summary on the activities of the Joint Task Force on Student Success for Underrepresented Students in Higher Education. And I'll just quote a couple of sections of his report. He notes that the number and complexity of issues the task force is hearing is overwhelming. If taken individually, solving all of them would appear to require hundreds of millions of dollars in new appropriations and dozens of pages of legislative text implementing new programs. And while these student and staff experiences are powerful, the legislature may have limited options to address many of the issues raised. In addition, there is no significant discussion underway on the topic of new revenues for task force purposes, and the state budget picture for the upcoming biennium is not clear. It appears very likely the task force will seek to make gains in the area of affordability first, follows nicely on your last conversation. After this issue area, it is also likely the task force will need to develop a framework that addresses myriad other concerns in the area of wraparound services, campus culture and climate, and campus policies in an ordered way. Task force has announced an intention to utilize work groups, likely over the summer, to research and deliberate upon recommendations, though the topics of the work groups have not been finally determined. The last paragraph of his report on the task force, on the legislative task force, notes the upcoming meeting, committee meeting next week on affordability. The commission HECC staff has invited Dr. Louise Seamster from the University of Iowa to present on wealth disparities and student debt. Her research, which I've been following for the last year, is quite interesting and I think important in this regard. And takes in particular a racial equity focus to the question of student debt and, of course, the underlying issue of affordability. So that's a little bit more about the task force, and I'm happy to, share additional thoughts or reflections or engage in conversation with commissioners this morning or in follow-up about how our work, particularly your work on agency request budget and legislative concepts, may align or correspond with the work that the legislative task force is doing. The remainder of Kyle's report provides a summary of the draft legislative concepts that we are continuing to work on at a staff level for ultimately presentation to you and the governor for consideration to the next legislative session. So this is a largely familiar list to you, although there is somewhat more detail in this report about the content of these concepts than you've previously seen. I'd emphasize, as we have in the past, these are very much drafts at this point and are in many cases conceptual form. We don't have actual bill language to share with you or anyone. These concepts, though, represent the are what we are sharing with partners and potential partners, community collaborators, and others in an interest, in an attempt to get feedback and help shape them before they become potential bills for your review or drafted concepts for your review and submission to the governor. So I'm not going to go through the full list. Again, you've seen at least the titles before in a previous meeting. I will note that the very first one is the concept number that would represent or would carry the programmatic changes to the Oregon Promise and Oregon Opportunity Grant that you discussed yesterday, whichever version of the modeling that you prefer to move forward will be reflected in that first of these. The third -3 is a really important and likely to be from the staff among our very highest recommendations to you for submission, because it is the bill that would enshrine the Native American College Access Grant in law, which would give it a greater sort of durability and permanence than it carries today, where it is just in effect a kind of budget asterisk and only committed for a year. You see sort of a variety of what I would describe as somewhat more technical or modest shifts to programs and to state law. On the kind of third page of the report, the second page of the table in dash 12, you see a proposal to expand our mentoring program, Aspire, that we coordinate to make it more equitable and inclusive, and likely to support other outreach and engagement efforts as well. In dash 13, you see a potential modification to the existing statute for early childhood grants. These are a grant program that we are also likely to request funding for to support folks, students who are training to become early childhood providers or in the early childhood workforce. And there may be a statutory change that can support that funding request. And in the final one of these, I'll just note the Continuous Improvement Committee recommendations. This is a subcommittee of the Workforce Talent Development Board, but I don't want you to be surprised because that subcommittee is charged with a pretty comprehensive look at the Oregon's public workforce system and potential recommendations around changes in it. And while we haven't spent much time with the HECC in describing the public workforce system or engaging you in that kind of consideration of what could or should be different in terms of how it's organized or how it's operated, this concept, like all HECC agency concepts, would come to you for approval and could before submission and could be quite significant. So I didn't want you to be surprised by that. And then the final note, this is at the bottom of page 3, is just the greater expectation that we have placed upon our staff as they develop and refine these concepts for your consideration than in prior years, particularly for community engagement and for a detailed and specific racial equity impact statement. Those are analyses that will accompany these concepts as they are brought forward. They obviously will look different based on the type of concept that it is. An overhaul of the state's financial aid system has likely a far more robust racial equity impact, or at least lends itself to a more robust racial equity analysis than a slight fee adjustment to our Office of Degree Authorization. Nevertheless, this is a newly required part of the legislative concept development and submission process. So we've placed that expectation upon our staff. With that, I'll close and see if there are any questions or comments. And I couldn't do this the kind of justice that Kyle would have, but in the interest of your timing, I wanted to help you sort of move the agenda along.
Thank you, Ben. This is great. Any questions or thoughts or comments for Ben? I am not seeing any. And I think we've had good introduction to these items over the last few months, but it's good to see them taking shape. And I really appreciate the last couple items that the notes at the bottom about the enhanced process, and appreciate the staff's work on those items. Any other questions about the legislative update? I am not seeing any, so thank you, Ben.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Cross and Commissioners. At this point, because our only remaining agenda items are 9.1 and 9.2, and those presenters are not available, my suggestion is that you take the long lunch break and return at 12:30, and we will complete the agenda as described on the posted agenda. So you would be in session from approximately 12:30 to 1:45.
Sounds good. So we are recessed until 12:30. We'll see you back here then. Thank you.